أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على رسوله المصطفى وخاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. Imam Ali alayhi salam says in a narration that's attributed to him, Al-afiyatu ni'matun khafiyya, idha wujidat nusiyat, wa idha fuqidat dhukir. Good health or well-being is a subtle blessing. If it exists in the individual, it's forgotten. And if it's lost, it's remembered. The well-being of an individual is not remembered. It's not remembered until the person goes into a state of illness. And this is the case with many things in our lives. We don't cherish and we don't value things until we begin to lose them. We don't know the importance of things until we lose those things. Whenever we have something, as long as it's with us, we forget its value. But the moment we lose it, we remember its value. What a believer and what a wary human being should do is that he should look for what has most value in his life and try to be conscious of the value of that thing and try to be aware of that thing throughout his life, to remind himself. So a person who understands the importance of health and doesn't neglect it, usually people remember it when they get sick, but an individual who, let's say, got sick once or twice, he begins to realize that health and well-being was something that he was not paying good attention to. He wasn't really valuing the moments that he was living in that well-being state. So what this person does is he tries to create an awareness of his health. He tries to remind himself every day of the importance of being healthy, either by remembering the bad effects of being sick, remembering the suffering that he went through as he was sick, and by implementing things in his life that would remind him. For example, that every day this person would get up and prepare a good and healthy meal for himself or herself, and that would serve as a reminder that good health and well-being is necessary as an important thing that has to be valued and remembered, because the moment you neglect your health and you allow your body to become weaker, then you will begin suffering like you did before, and then you would fall into many other problems. Now, health is related to the physical body of the human being, and this is physical health that I'm referring to over here. This body that we have, made up of these organs and the skin, is a body that we Muslims believe God has created and attached a spirit to. So most Muslim scholars believe that there's this duality. And I don't mean that there's any Muslim scholars that don't believe in the existence of a spirit, but the definition or the theory of how they're connected to each other differs. But a majority of them believe in this duality of soul and spirit, that God has created the essence of a human being as a spiritual form, and then connected the spirit to the physical body, and this body is in a physical form. Now, why does this happen? Why did humans remain as spiritual entities? Why did they come down and they became attached to a physical entity or a physical body? Well, there are philosophers and mystics in the Islamic world who tried to answer this question in a number of different ways. One of the ways that it was answered with was that because God is absolute in his being, then what that entails is that anything that has the possibility of existing must be part of that absolute entity or that absolute being. And anything impossible, then that cannot be known. But if there's anything possible, then it has to be known because it's part of God, because God is absolute. And the definition of what an absolute is that which contains all possibilities. Everything possible is part of the absolute being. That's what the definition of an absolute is. So if you assume there's something that's possible, then this is part of the absolute entity or the absolute claim that you're making. Impossibilities involve something such as contradictions. So you cannot have a creature that exists and doesn't exist at the same time. That's something that's impossible. You can't have, for example, a cup of water that holds 10 liters and you expect it to hold 20 liters. You can't have a 10-liter cup carrying 20 liters of water. That's an impossibility in its own nature, and by definition, it's impossible. So we don't consider that as a possibility. We don't consider that to be part of the divine and absolute entity. So if there is something that's a possibility, then it's part of that divine entity, divine being. One of the things that was possible to exist was this physical world. And we know that it was possible to exist because it does exist and we live in it. Had we not seen it, maybe we wouldn't have known that a physical entity or a physical reality could emanate from the metaphysical God. But because we are in it, we are aware that there is a physical world, and therefore we understand that there is this is a possibility of existence. Now, when the spirit of the human being, the soul, was created, the soul wanted to reach perfection, wanted to know God in the most perfect form. And being spiritual, it knew everything spiritual and metaphysical. But since it wants to know God in a more perfect manner and it wants to perfect itself, and basically perfecting anything in this world means that it reaches a higher level of consciousness and higher level of nearness to the absolute, then it has to figure out and it has to discover everything that belongs to the absolute. And then it becomes more aware of who the absolute is. It becomes more aware of who God is. Since a physical world is part of that reality, part of God's reality, then this entity wants to know God from this aspect as well. It wants to know God from the aspect of the physical world. So it descended and it attached itself to a body because without the body, it's unable to detect anything around here. The soul cannot see physical bodies because the soul is immaterial. And these bodies that we're living here, the physical bodies, they're materialistic. So we needed an eye, a physical eye, for the soul to access this world, to have a gateway, to have a mechanism, a vessel that it can work with in order to interact with the world, the physical world outside of it. The same thing goes for senses. The same thing goes for sounds. If I want to touch a table and I feel the solidness of the table, or touch water and feel liquid, the soul itself cannot detect liquid. It cannot detect a solid because it's immaterial again. It doesn't have the ability to touch anything physical or to experience anything physical. But it does so through the body. It does so. So it knows that there is something called a solid because it connected to the body and the body touched the solid, and therefore the soul was able to detect that there is something called solid and that the solid is part of God's existence. And then the knowledge of the soul increased. Now it came to know something that it didn't know before, and thus gained a higher level of knowledge. This is from one aspect. Another aspect, for the soul to become more perfect, it has to attach itself to a body that draws it down more to the physical, it sucks it down to the physical world. and the body and the soul cannot improve itself, cannot perfect itself, cannot move forward without this thing that acts upon it. So attached to the body gets pleasures and desires in a physical form. So let's say eating, involving itself with relations of the opposite gender, and listening to things. There's a lot of different types of pleasures that are physical by nature. And when the soul goes against those, or the individual chooses not to do those and chooses a spiritual pleasure over it, then the spirit in this sense strengthens itself and gains a higher level of realization. So now that the soul connected to the body and came into this world, most of the human beings, because they became so accustomed to this world, they forgot where they came from. They forgot that their origin was spiritual. And they became so indulged in this materialistic world that they began giving the priority to their physical body and their physical pleasures. And they became so indulged in it that a lot of them even forgot that their soul even exists, and they began to deny that it does exist. Any person who moves away from physical pleasures and materialism, slowly this consciousness and this awareness of the existence of the spirit comes by itself. It doesn't need any proof or demonstration. This is something that a person is able to realize on his own. Now, you could come and argue and bring proof and demonstrations for the existence of a soul, but that wouldn't do anyone good who doesn't really concern himself with that aspect of his life. So now if we give priority to the spiritual side of the human being, what is our responsibility towards our physical aspect of our existence? We have the soul, we take care of it, we pray, we fast, we obey God, we listen to His commandments, we try to be good individuals, we try not to lie, we try not to have any vices in our lives, we try to be virtuous individuals. These are all spiritual qualities. We try to follow the ethical and moral standards that God has taught us in the Quran. We recite the Quran every day. And we train our spirit, and we train our soul, and we improve it. And these are called spiritual exercises. What about this body that God gave us? Do we have any responsibility towards it? Well, a lot of the ahadith that we have that came from Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they talk about the importance of taking care of your physical body. We have a lot of ahadith that talk about, well, actually we have books that contain hundreds of narrations titled The Medicine of the Prophet or The Medicine of Ahlul Bayt, where the Imams give us specific instructions on how to take care of your body and how to take care of yourself and protect yourself from ailments. Now, the reason why the body is important is because if the body becomes sick, and if the body becomes affected by those things around it, it becomes fatigued. And if the body becomes worn out and it doesn't have any energy, then that would affect your spiritual life as well. To get up to pray, you need strength in your legs, right? To get up and pray, you need to be able you need to be in a proper state of mind. We know that a lot of things that we do throughout the day to our body, a lot of the food that we consume has an effect on our mental state. And we cannot disconnect this from each other. We can't say, well, let me do whatever I want to my body, and that doesn't matter as long as I'm doing my spiritual obligations. Well, this is not how a believer or how a Muslim's attitude should be towards life. If I have a responsibility towards God spiritually, and well, I immediately and naturally have a responsibility physically as well. A lot of people who grow older, and I've read that some of the mystics say that even a mystic individual, a person who has spiritual experiences, towards the end of his life, when he becomes sick or she becomes sick, they begin to lose some of that spiritual awareness that they have because of the physical ailments that they suffer from. If you have headaches and you have migraines and you have, let's say, difficulties breathing, or you have pain in your body, or you eat food that's unhealthy and is constantly making you exhausted and tired. When you get up to meditate, I mean, do you even have the energy to get up and meditate? You find yourself exhausted, you find yourself unable to perform your duties, not just towards yourself, but towards others as well. If we have children in the house, and I'm a father, then one of my responsibilities is to be able to play with my child, to be able to give my child a good life, and to be able to participate in the activities that my child is undertaking. If I haven't taken care of my health, and I'm unable to do that, and then that child has something missing in his life, then I'm also responsible for that. And I'm not here to say that, there's a specific standard for good health. You don't have to go to the gym every day and be a bodybuilder in order to be classified as an individual with good health. That's not necessarily what good health is. What a person should strive doing is he should strive keeping illnesses and ailments that are harmful away from himself. Keep things away from himself that would affect his responsibilities towards his spirit, his self, and towards others. And the pandemic that we're living in is a clear example of how the Muslim should feel even more responsible than other people. Before even listening to health experts, the Muslim has to know from the religious point of view, his duty before God mandates upon him that he takes care of himself and his family and takes care of those around him. We have a lot of commandments from God that require us to wash and to be clean and to maintain this cleanliness, not just for our bodies, but in our houses as well. To clean the house, to not leave garbage in the house. A lot of recommendations from the Prophet and the Imams regarding hygiene. And this all falls into that category of taking care of yourself, your body, your physical body, as well as your spiritual, your spirit and your soul. Because Islam didn't come to be a religion that creates a society of hermits. And I mean hermits here in the negative sense. I'm not saying that hermits are bad. There are hermits that are good. And if they see the responsibility as being hermits, specific individuals, then that could be good for them. I'm speaking on a societal level, that not everybody is ordered to become like that. And Islam came speaking to the majority of the masses. It didn't come to speak to one individual or two or a small group of people. Islam came to speak to the whole nation. That's why the teachings that it gives, in general, are to be understood for the general public, for the general masses. There could be exceptions to the general rules here and there, and a person might justify certain types of behaviors or paths that he takes or she takes in life based on those exceptions. But in general, Islam came to guide the whole masses, the collectivity. So when it comes and it tells an individual to take care of their body and to take care of their worldly affairs, it is because it cares for the individual himself, and it also cares for his family because of social order. And a family is the institution in our life which instills teachings and instills the correct conduct into the children's minds and the children's hearts and the children's souls. It all begins in the house. So a father and mother are responsible for themselves, first of all, to take care of their mental well-being and their physical well-being, in order to be able to pass that on to their children as well. And the children see their parents as role models for them. They follow everything they do. If a child sees that their family and their parents are not taking care of their health, at the beginning, children look at their parents as if they're God, right? Everything they do, they want to imitate, and they justify their behavior. And you know what? Even when we grow up, when we become older, if you look at someone who's 50 or 60, they still talk about what their mom and dad used to do. My father used to do this, or my mom used to do that. And you find this is ingrained inside of us. The effect of the behavior of a parent in front of a child, or what a parent does when it makes a decision, that child will never forget. It takes their teaching from the parents. So taking care of our well-being, taking care of our health, first of all, for our own sake, for our own salvation, and our own journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is necessary. Secondly, for the family as an institution. And we know that society is composed of groups of different families. So you have one family, that's one structure. And if you put 100 families together, then you have a community. And then if you put those 100 with another 1,000 or 10,000 or a million, then you have a population, or you have a civilization, or you have whatever category it fits into. So then comes that responsibility towards the family. And then you have the responsibility towards your community. So sometimes you might, want to choose a life of, you don't care that much about your health. But not caring about your health would lead to the harm of other people. Then it becomes obligatory upon you to take care of your health. And it becomes forbidden upon you to do anything that would harm others. Because what is meant for society is to live in this one type of harmony. You are not moving towards God on your own. You are moving towards God with your family, and you're moving towards God with your society as well. The ultimate objective is to be able to form a society that fears God and that assists one another. This concept of brotherhood that is very important in Islam as well, especially in Shiism. The Imams have always tried to build a spiritual connection and relationship between their followers and amongst their followers, not just between the follower and the Imam, but between the followers themselves. After the Battle of Karbala, Imam Hussein alayhi salam's body was on the floor, and the Arabs had, not just the Arabs, different nations, and usually what they used to do in a war back then was that they used to loot the clothing and the belongings of the individuals that they killed. Imam Hussein's clothes were taken away, and the Imam was wearing something under because he knew that this was going to happen. He wore something that's without value under it so that nobody takes it, and he preserves his honor and dignity so that his body remains covered, at least when he's laying down in the sand of Karbala. His ring was taken away. His turban was taken away. These people, it was not enough for them to kill the grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, but they even looted his belongings and looted his things and took them with them. What are they rejoicing over? What are they taking? A piece of cloth or a piece of metal. It's true that it's Imam Hussein ﷺ, but they're not taking it because it's that. They think that they've gotten something. It's the worthless thing in this world that you when you die, you don't take any of this with you. Yet they were running after petty things like that. This night, according to some, is dedicated to Abdullah al-Radi', Abdullah the infant, the son of Imam Hussein ﷺ, who was present in Karbala. He was a small infant, and when the family of the Imam ﷺ passed away, the mother of Abdullah her name was Al-Rabab. When the family of Imam Hussein ﷺ and his friends and companions passed away, and they were martyred by the enemies, Lady Zainab ﷺ brought this infant to the Imam, and she told him to go and ask for water for him. He's been without water for 3 days. This is according to one of the narrations. She said that this child has not had water for 3 days, and her mother's breast milk has dried up. Go to the enemies and ask them for water for this child. The Imam Hussein ﷺ takes Abdullah, and he stands before the enemy, and he holds him up to him. Imagine a small infant, a small child that just came into this world. What kind of evilness do you have in your heart to prevent such a child, an infant, from having water? What kind of individual do you have to be? What kind of nation are you? You've reached the point of humiliating and torturing and harming the Prophet ﷺ, his family, and you are the Islamic nation, the Muslim nation, claiming to be following God and His Messenger. And look at what they're doing. This is something that's hard for us to comprehend. How does a nation reach a point like this? Not long after the Prophet's demise, the Imam reaches the point where he has to bring his infant child and hold it in front of these enemies and tell them, if you had a problem with us, the elder individuals, the older people, the adults, what sin has this child committed for you to prevent him from having water and not give him any water and allow him to suffer from thirst like this? What does a child know? A child just feels pain and suffering at that moment. The Imam holds him up and he tells the people that if it was the problem was that you have is with us, then why are you preventing this child from having any water? The army of the enemy of Bani Sa'd, they had a dispute. Some were saying that give him water, and another group was saying no, don't give him water. They kept arguing with each other until Umar ibn Sa'd turned around to someone called Harmala. And he told Harmala, end the dispute that's going on. Harmala was a very good, he was very good with shooting arrows. And he had an arrow that had 3 heads on top. And his solution to the problem was that he would just kill this child. While the Imam was holding him up to the people and they were arguing whether to give him water or not, Harmala turns around. Look at this evilness. The darkness of a heart of an individual. What kind of individual can do this? He holds the arrow and he looks for an area on the child and he finds his neck over here is showing and is reflecting the light of the sun. He pulls the arrow and he shoots it. And the arrow comes and hits the child in his neck. And the child begins shaking and shaking like that in the hands of the Imam, and his blood starts to spill. The Imam ﷺ takes the blood and throws it in the air. And he says, what makes this tolerable for me is that I know that God is watching, and it is in the eyes of God. Abdullah was killed in this, and he was the youngest of the martyrs of Imam Hussain ﷺ's family. And he was buried at Karbala. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us our sins and to guide us onto the straight path and to allow us to realize the truth and follow it and to give us strength when we were tested before Him, when we were tested in following the truth or falsehood, to be able to choose the truth over falsehood. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Muhammadan wa ala ahli bayti al-tayyibin al-tahirin.